Thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure you come back for the next episode covering the points of this conversation.
And follow the podcast on social media by finding @Prestigious_Pod.
Follow me, Mr. Kent, at Mr. Chris R. Kent.
Follow me, Chris Bean, at Chris Bean Official.
Join our Discord for exclusive content and personal interactions.
And if you'd like to be coached on how to live a more prestigious life, you can reach out to me, Chris Bean, on one of my social media platforms, or by emailing the podcast directly at prestigiousInitiative@gmail.com.
Lastly, sign up for our newsletter either through social media or on our website.
This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Bean, and here with me is Chris Kent. Hello, Mr. Kent.
Hello, sir.
We have a distinguished guest with us today, someone who has not only navigated the dynamic world of HR, but has also made significant contributions in leadership coaching. Nita Armstrong, welcome.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, Nita, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what brought you here today?
Sure, absolutely. I have the privilege of running the HR Effect, which is an HR consulting organization specializing in hiring, retaining, and promoting top talent. I've had the opportunity to work with incredible institutions such as the Smithsonian Institution, as well as Amazon, and been able to really impact mom and pop organizations within my community. We started off focusing around nonprofit organizations, but now we're spreading across in the DC metro area as well.
Very good. Now, given your extensive experience, you've held various roles from functional positions to strategic business partnerships. How do you see the role of HR evolving in today's fast-paced society and really this ever-changing business landscape?
That's a great question. I believe that we are becoming more humanized. We're making the human approach more digestible, taking the empathetic solutions approach, helping individuals understand that leadership isn't just within our people managers, but there's a skill to that in every step along the way. And I think that's making a huge impact on how businesses are successful.
Now, with technology being what it is now, I have to ask this question because AI is the hot topic. How does AI fit into your realm?
Oh God, ChatGPT is my best friend. So aside from having it up continuously, I think there's a huge advantage to it, right? Staying on top of technology trends, understanding how us as HR leaders can better leverage to speak the same language as our engineers and to speak the same language as the community we're serving is a huge advantage for us.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. So that's an interesting take. I can imagine that from your viewpoint, you could use something like ChatGPT, have what you essentially want to say, but tell it to convey the message to the type of person you want to convey that message to. And moreover than that, you can add a tone to it so you can convey that message to that specific person or that type of working, whatever that area is. And then on top of that, convey a friendly tone or a serious tone or whatever those things are. And then that can really help to offload some of that external work and really not only tidy up, but make it so it's easy to be digested by the in person.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anywhere between taking a process document to turn it into either a scope of work or a job description or even just taking a process guide and then making it a playbook. I mean, ChatGPT has such great advantages. AI in specific has such great advantages. It makes our lives easier so that we can take the administrative component and automate it and then show up strategically and help really show up as a thought leader for who we're partnering with.
And right now, it doesn't. I agree with what all the things you're saying, but right now that doesn't seem to doesn't seem to be what other people are saying. I like that I can offload some of my tedious tasks to something like ChatGPT, and then use that time that I get because I don't have to do whatever that task is. GPT is doing it. I read over it, I adjust it, change it to tweak it just a little bit to put it to where I need it to be, and then move on. And then what I found is that helps to, again, offload that workload. I can then have better communications. I can better have, that connection with people, because I don't have to spend time doing that tedious type of work that a machine could be programmed to do in my behalf.
I agree. I think there are some advantages, but it really comes down to understanding how to leverage AI, right? I think it's important for us to really figure out what works for us individually. For me, I find that it works better as an administrative assistant than it does for me to kind of think through ideas and thoughts. But it all comes down to the prompts that we type down.
Agreed. I was talking with a friend of mine about AI. This is early on as GPT was getting on, and we came to the conclusion that ChatGPT would be really good as an educator, as long as the back end could be done in such a way that it wasn't a human wasn't pulling the strings to dictate the kind of avenue that it was approaching. But the benefit to it was the student could ask the question and continue to ask questions over and over and over again and move into different rabbit holes as it went. And the teacher, the administrator, would never get upset, never get boring, never get frustrated because they're asking the questions, but they would always give the answers. And as long as the answers could be true and what the actuals actually are, and not have, again, somebody pulling the strings, that would be wonderful.
I love that, Chris. I think that's such a great way of looking at AI's advantages. I might use that in future conversations, but I agree. Absolutely. It's coming in with that emotional component and being able to get a non-emotional response and factual responses. And I think it's definitely another advantage.
Now, moving into leadership development, I know that's a passion for you. What strategies do you find most effective in helping professionals and entrepreneurs help to reach their full potential? And with that, how do these strategies contribute to, really staying competitive in the workforce today?
Sure. That's a great question. Thank you. I think the humanized approach is the human approach is probably what I use the most, helping individuals understand that their pathway is not the same as their mentor or a peer or coworker. Helping them understand that there's various different components that contribute to their accomplishment and growth. So it's making it more digestible and making and helping them understand the different milestones that they're going to have to hit. It is a very emotional process and leadership growth, right? And development. Coaching involves, having a high level of EQ and helping individuals really process the emotions of why they respond the certain way that they do with certain behavioral changes or programming. And so a part of that approach is taking the empathetic path, helping them understand, like, who are they, how do they get there, and what does it mean for them to do what they need to do to get there.
Right. Okay. So thinking through that a little bit, you talked about, really, it seems like the clients have a kind of overlay that they lay out over themselves, and they try to become what their mentor is. Right? Is that am I getting that right?
And sometimes I've definitely seen that. They have either one or two people that they look up to, and they're like, "Oh, I want to be that person when I grow up," right? And so they start taking kind of similar steps to that approach. Many of the times in business strategy, we've seen that that's worked out well. But where we see the gaps is where the human component comes into play. We're all coming in with biases, filters, trauma, functioning, conditioning. And sometimes those characteristics or fundamentals aren't considered when we're growing and evolving. So I think that's what I bring to light.
Right. And while it's important to, maybe we can strive to be that type of person and have certain qualities that they have, we have to, remember that we can't become that person because we didn't go through whatever they went through in order to achieve that. And we likely couldn't do that anyways, just because we're different than them. And so really staying true and really authentic to ourselves is key as we're striving to achieve more.
Exactly. Authenticity plays a huge role in our true leaders, right? You could tell the difference between Jeff Bezos and Mark Bonds, and every individuals across the United States who have really made that mark. It it really, their authentic self shows up, and you can tell, like, okay, there's that difference.
Right. And I think it's easy to tell the people who are doing it for a show. They're putting on an act. They're acting like their quote unquote authentic self, but that's not really them. They're just striving. They're putting on a mask of somebody else, and I think it's often very easy to tell when that happens. And really, if they could just do a similar thing in their own way, they would probably seek further praise moreover than what they're getting because they're doing a fake version of it. But if they can be authentic to who they are and do it in their own way, it would separate them. It would have that novelty that humans crave novelty. We want something new and exciting. We don't want the same boring stuff. So you don't want to be the same as somebody else. You want to stand out from the crowd. That's what that person did. So you can't be that. You have to stand out, be your own self, be authentic to who you are.
Exactly. And we feel it, right? When we meet new friends, when we going to a networking event, we can tell who wants to show up and genuinely want to make connections. And we can tell who wants to show up to be there. And so I think it carries a lot of weight. And it's all about how you really make the other person feel. So you're walking away with these emotions and these memories of this individual. And the authenticity carries a lot more weight.
Absolutely. Now, as you were talking, we talked about having the human approach. What strategies could somebody have to help to develop that and help to convey that message to their followers?
That's great. I believe that kind of zooming out kind of helps. I do that in my personal life. Sometimes when I'm experiencing something very emotional, I have a tendency to get reactive. And so what I do is I pause and I try to zoom out as much as I can to really help myself understand, what is the bigger picture? Does this really carry that weight? In 5 years, am I really going to be that pissed about this situation? And I think that's one thing that I've found to be really helpful. Just kind of taking small incremental steps backwards to say, oh, does this make sense? Um, and that's what I would give as an advice.
So with that, do you find that doing some sort of reflective journaling helps in that regard as well?
It does. It does. I do the 5-3-5 step, which is like highlighting the three biggest things that are important to me and what I'm working towards, my goals. And then the 5 things that I could do in one day. Generally, it's the 3-3-3. I find that I can get up to 5 things done in a day, maybe a bit of an overachiever here. But I think once, if I get past the 3 to 5 in a day, I feel accomplished. One of those things is making my bed every morning. And I think that's like one of those things I'm like, yeah, I did it. I was able to get it done. But in that situation, when I'm not able to hit those 3 to 5 markers, that's when I'm like, am I still contributing towards my goal? Am I still making an impact? Have I made an impact? And just really being grateful for the opportunities that I've had, because I think gratitude really does carry the same level of weight as well.
Well, yeah, just really by putting a different perspective on what happens. If you come at things and you're looking for the negative things, of course, that's exactly what you're going to find. But if you can look at whatever the same event was that maybe was detrimental to you, but if you can look at it from the side of gratitude, from the perspective of how can I be grateful that this terrible thing happened to me, what benefit comes out of this? And it doesn't come overnight. Sometimes it doesn't happen till for a year or so later that you find that you get that clarity on that. But if you can change your perspective on those events and come at them from a sense of gratitude, it changes
Right.
everything for you.
It really does. And similar to patience, gratitude is something you have to practice over and over. And as leaders, this is a huge opportunity. I mean, I feel like you get to make 5 to 10 choices a day as a leader. And sometimes they don't always go the way that we planned them to go. And I think taking a moment to be grateful to have either the supportive team or the opportunity to make these decisions is helpful in the long run for them to actually say, okay, well, let's pivot, let's adjust, let's be a little bit more flexible in our approach. And I think those are characteristics of what make our leaders more human in how they function and how the team perceives them as well.
Well, yeah. So bring in the team aspect, and if the leader is judgmental and pointing fingers, they're playing the blame game. Anytime something bad happens, then there's no forward progress. You get stuck, and you're pointing fingers and you're blaming other people. There's no okay. What do we do from here? There's no pivot that happens. But if the leader can come at that from a sense of gratitude, if they can be grateful for those things and the team that they have, not just in crisis type moments, but as a general standard as they go through their day, the connections that they're going to build with their team are so much more impactful, so much more positive than otherwise, because then that leader gets to be a human, somebody that has a personality, somebody that is interested in what their team is doing because they're grateful for their team that's there to help them. And then that leader follower type of mentorship or relationship is so much deeper in as far as the connection goes, because they see them as a person, not just, oh, watch out for Jim, we don't want to mess with him today, he's in a bad mood. Well, he's in a bad mood every day. You don't want to have that type of sense as the leader. You want to have that connection with your team, and by seeking to be grateful for your team, that will do it.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that statement.
Now, as far as productivity and organizational efficiency go, of course, those are crucial aspects of any successful business, whether it's big or small. Could you share
Right.
some key strategies that would help leaders to implement and enhance productivity within their teams or organizations?
Sure. I think organization is a huge characteristic trait of what we've found to be successful, right? But for developing leaders, for individuals with large teams, it's hard to really keep the team focused. So my strategy is to pick one thing. So find 1 to 2 goals within a semester or a quarter that you can achieve and is achievable or attainable, and work towards that. The behaviors, the contributions, the morality, engagement should all be focused in achieving that one goal. And you're more likely to succeed versus sparsing the team out over different goals or just multiple goals. So I think find that one thing, focus on the goal, help the team understand what the goal is, making sure you're articulate, speaking their language to really help them comprehend that goal. And then it becomes a team effort.
Very good. Now, as far as that communication goes, I know that sometimes the leader, the head of the organization, doesn't necessarily know the day-to-day things that the lower, the floor people are doing. And then there's a disconnect. And then hopefully if they're the type of leader that we talked about that has the gratitude, they're thankful for their teams, they're interacting with them, perhaps that would be a little bit better. But I'm sure that you've worked with leaders who are separate from those, and they don't necessarily know what the day-to-day jobs are of the on-floor people. And because of that, the communication from there is not as strong as it could be. In those instances, would you perhaps suggest a intermediate person to come in and help to convey that leader's message to the floor people, just so that that communication can be spread as clearly as possible?
Yes, we've seen organizations struggle with communication gaps. I mean, I want to throw out a number, but I haven't done the research behind it, but it's fairly high, right? In my personal experience from conversations that we've had, communication gaps are huge. But I think it's not just communication; it's the comprehension, right? And so we've seen leaders communicate and say what their predecessors have communicated to continue that strategy, or their senior leadership team have communicated. But when it comes down to our frontline team members or even our individual contributors who aren't specialized in that practice, it could be hard for them to really comprehend what is it that you're saying? How does it correlate to what I'm doing? And what value do I add? And I think business partners, HR professionals, or even really investing in our mid-level managers for them to understand is going to be really important in how we communicate with different individuals with different backgrounds and experience. And so one of the challenges that we face is the communication gap. But I think as strategic thought partners and HR business partners and mid-level managers, I want to encourage and empower them to continuously be that thought leader, to be that collaborator, to be that soundboard, and try to find ways to communicate so that individuals comprehend what we're trying to say.
And I think a part of this, as far as the communication goes, is for the individual team members to understand the mission, the why behind that goal or whatever the initiative is, so that they understand their specific role in that endeavor.
Right. The value added. Yeah, absolutely. The why, the purpose really does make a difference because it helps individuals connect the dot between like, why do I or my role exist to the larger organization? And how does that all play together? And I think people find that, if you're playing a certain role on a soccer field, you understand exactly what your role is and how to make that impact. And that's the same thing in an organization. You have to understand why are you this data analyst and what value do you bring. And so team members feel a lot more forthcoming. And I think productivity also we've seen is impacted by clearly understanding the purpose.
Right. And I think that on top of that, it also gives them a little bit of an ownership, because it gives them ownership. Like, hey, I need to take ownership over this area because this is me. I'm important to this team because this is my job. And I know that I contribute to this team by doing X. And by taking ownership of it, by owning that, they're going to be much more apt to do such a more impactful job than otherwise because they own that area.
Absolutely. I think it was Jeff Bezos who actually said that he started distributing stock amongst team members because he wanted team members to feel like they own the company. And so therefore they're able to actually make that true impact. And you're going to show up for things that you own, right? It's like watering the tree versus like picking the flowers and the fruits off the tree.
Absolutely. Yes. What a great way to put that. Now, as your role as a strategic leader, you've executed strategies that have driven business results. What advice would you have for other leaders that are aiming to create a competitive edge in their workforce in today's competitive environment?
Understand where emotion sits. I think emotion is a huge contributor to success. But when dealing with people, there's emotion. When dealing with process, it's a non-emotional state. And so understanding the difference of how to really carry emotion and creating those systems logically is going to play a huge part in how decisions are made.
So, okay, you've talked already a little bit about emotional intelligence. Can you give maybe some examples of something that somebody could do to increase their emotional intelligence?
I think it's being self-awareness plays a huge part. Just understanding one, before you even start gathering knowledge, understand where you currently sit, what information you have, and how you currently show up. I think practicing self-awareness is a huge contributor to even being able to evolve and experience high EQ. Day-to-day practices and how you respond. Are you having negative thoughts? Do you tend to be a glass half full or glass half empty kind of person? And then in the situations that you're glass half empty, is that a trend? Is there a reason for that trend? And does that certain practice or thought process show up in the workplace? And if it does, how are you responding? So self-awareness is a great start to that.
Okay, I'm gonna tack onto something you said because I really like it. You said your daily practices and not habits. Is there a reason that you chose that practice word as opposed to habits?
I think that there is consciousness or even subconscious behavior that is contributing to how we function, right? I consciously don't make my bed on the weekends. And that's just for me to allow myself to really force that, I guess, non-discipline and that free thought process. And it shows in how I then make decisions in the day. And that's a practice. That's for me, but it's not a habit. Whereas in the habit, I my actual instinct is to make the bed. And so I think individuals, we make choices throughout the day, whereas, oh, we'll stir this coffee with a spoon and we won't put it in the sink or we'll leave it on the counter. And if those are choices that we're making, even though consciously or subconsciously, we want to actually put that in the sink. So that's why I use practice versus habit.
I, I, I really love that because it's something we have talked about a ton of times on here. That lots of times habits get a weird connotation because you were told that you just set them and then you can forget them because they just happen automatically, and that's not how
Right.
things happen. Because if you can change your perspective on that and consciously, as you're talking about, consciously go through the practice of doing those things. That changes your whole outlook on how you view those things. Because
Right.
otherwise, you say, okay, you just make a habit to do this, and then you don't have to think about it. Well, no. I want to think about this because I want to improve in this area. And if I do it so that I don't think about it, I therefore won't be improving because I'm not thinking about it. But by,
Right.
again, changing that word from habit to practice is such a impactful way to change that perspective, because then I'm practicing this and I'm practicing it with the intent and purpose to improve in XYZ area. And just by shifting that little bit of dialogue, it changes the whole outlook on how people see that. So I really agree with that switch of those words.
Yeah, absolutely. Atomic Habits by James Clear, great book. It's on my bookshelf, and I would say that's one of my biggest recommendations for books. You're right. Habit has its negative connotation that's built into our programming. Um, but I think that book takes a minute to really help us understand, like, you can create healthy habits, and here's what that conscious approach looks like. So definitely a great read. Definitely recommend that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the biggest takeaway that I've had from that was it's the systems that you implement, not necessarily those habits. And that was monumental for me.
Right. And you have full control over doing that, right? It's not that it's predetermined, that you really do can come in and say, actually, no, I choose this and I choose that.
That's right. Now, as we move into HR trends, what challenges do you see emerging from organizations, and how can they proactively address these challenges to foster a thriving and resilient workforce?
Sure. That's a great question. Thank you. I believe I've got my eye focused around what HR is evolving into. We have that traditional HR, the human resources team, that is a lot more reactive. And then we've got the people operations team, which is a lot more proactive and strategy based. We now have people enablement, which I think is very slow trend. I'm not sure if it's really picking up, but the thought process behind that is now that our HR team or people operations are now people enablers. So we're not only being proactive, but we're also being consciously reactive and strategic about how we show up. We're bringing the human component into our practices. And I think what I've seen is AI's impact of automation. We've seen our leaders go into more EQ leadership training and understand across the broad spectrum of how do we really specialize and support. Whereas you could have taken an HR team and dropped them into any industry and we would have been successful. Whereas now we're saying, okay, actually, I'm going to invest specifically within this industry and learn what's the thought process, what's the mindset of these individuals, and how do I better show up as a leader to really enable your success. And I think that's a huge trend that I am absolutely for.
Well, yeah, so that's an interesting way to look at that too, because HR, of course, is human relations, and I think people leave off that human part, and they see those humans that are working for them, especially the top level leaders. They see those people that are working for them as little robots that are going through and moving through and doing the things that they're supposed to do as if they were an automatic a robot. But they're humans. And so being able to convey the messages to them in a human way with that emotional connection is huge, right? And the HR team really is not necessarily only to deal with whatever issues arise in the companies, but they're there to help to connect the team members, or that human relations part. That is the essential essence of the job. And I think that as time has went, now it seems thankfully we're back on a little bit better trend as this goes. But I think a little bit there in the middle, maybe for a little bit longer than a little bit, but for a while we lost that human part. As far as the jobs go, and especially again the top level executives meeting and seeing the other team members as humans. And so it sounds like we're back on the human side of that.
We did. And I hate to use COVID, but I want to say that it's made a huge impact. The pandemic was a huge awakening and a huge shift for the HR industry. I mean, we were kind of behind the scenes partnering, but we were brought to the front lines to help us and team members and leaders really understand how do we now, navigate through this like volatile space. And we stepped up to the plate. And I think we were able to really make that impact. But I think the way that we approached this was what was already built within our system is to take that human approach and to say that, we're all being impacted. We're all experiencing change. And how do we do this and do it delicately? So, yeah, I love the direction that HR is going in. I'm happy that, we have some amazing leaders within the industry that are carrying the torches and trailblazing their way. And it's going to be interesting to watch how the trends continue on.
Well, and maybe as bad as this sounds, I think having COVID and then using that as an opportunity to, find a dragon, sort of say, that's worth fighting in order to come out the other side, and having changed for the better was helpful, because that gave everybody a sort of common enemy to fight for. And then on the other end of that, we can kind of strategically design what work looks like on the other end, because it now has to be a little bit different. And because of that, we have to take up the torch and make it different.
I agree.
Yeah. Now, leadership coaching and training is something that plays a significant role in professional development. Can you share a success story or impactful moment where your coaching has made a positive difference in somebody's career journey?
Sure, absolutely. Oh God. So I've had the opportunity to work with, actually, I'm going to choose a nonprofit organization here. And it is the Ranson Community Gardens, which is located in Ranson, West Virginia. They have a group of team members that sit on the board. And I think one of the opportunities is that they all specialize in different areas of either business or gardening, or are their opportunity in the community, or the way they serve the community. And the advantage that I saw was helping each individual just recognize their strengths. So coming in and partnering with the board, head of the board, to recognize and pinpoint and understand individual strengths to bring the team together to take the gardens further, to make an impact in the community, was something that I helped and supported them in doing. And so going from a community garden that was a reactive space available for the community, and going from that and to now holding classes and being a part of different schools and teaching and educating, and expanding on their impact and their resources, is kind of where they are now. And it's just helping a leader recognize who their team is, right? And then understand how do they best use their advantage to serve. And so in this space, I think it's huge because it not just served as a safe space for the community, which it was, but now it's also become a hub for resource. It's become this space that children feel comfortable spending time in. Individuals in the community reach out to get better information. And the leader now serves within 2 different city council presence, and to be an actual impact to the community strategically.
Well, congratulations on that. That seems like that was a mighty good endeavor for you to help in that regard with.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity, really. I think that's exactly those are the wins that I want to continuously celebrate. And I think it's not the impact that it has within the team, but it's the waves that they cause.
Yeah. And so what's interesting there, and I think a lot of times this gets messed up, is you have all the top level players on a team. And despite having all the top level players on the team is still failing. Why is that? Well, you hit the nail on the head, is because those team members are not doing what they are best suited for. You can have all the best team members, but if you don't have them in the job that they're best suited for, the team is going to fail. So you have to strategically put the people in the place that serves them the best so they can
Yeah,
get fulfillment out of their job in order for the team and the business to succeed overall.
exactly. Exactly. I remember during a team huddle, I was asked the question, how do you explain your job to a 3-year-old? And I have a 3-year-old, so I'm thinking, well, how can she possibly understand? Um, and I think the best way that I explained it was it's like, mommy, make sure that you have the right tool in for the right job. And so in her head, she's thinking toolkit, so hammer and screwdriver. And that's exactly what it is, right? We're all individuals who are going to serve a purpose, but we can only make an impact if we have the right skills, the right responsibilities and understanding. And that's part of what a strategic thought partner and a business leader does is we help organizations understand, do they have the right people in the right seats to make the right impact?
Absolutely. Very good. And definitely explained well enough that a 3-year-old can understand it. And that's interesting you bring that up, because we've had a couple people on that have talked about that as far as being able to explain their job so that a child can understand it. And with that comes the idea that they know what their job is, right? It's
Right.
moreover than just being able to explain it to a child, but being able to actually know what your job is. What is your role that you're fulfilling? And being able to do that is not something that everybody can do, because it seems like a lot of the times the individuals who are performing the jobs, their job changes from day to day, and it's a huge, they don't know necessarily what their actual job was, and it maybe was one thing when they were hired, but now a year or two later, 5 years later, whatever, is so much different. And being able to actually think through your job in such a way that you can understand the core element of what it is so that you can explain it to a child means that you adequately know what your responsibilities are when you get hired to do whatever the job is, and then you can fulfill that role because you know exactly what you have to do.
Exactly. Exactly. It comes back to that self-awareness aspect, right? I think one of the things that I consider myself is a true partner. And I think I showed up like that in my personal life and I show up like that in my professional life. And it comes back to my own personal characteristics and who I am. And I want to empower team members and people to really take a minute to say, like, how and who am I and how do I show up? Um, and then how can I apply those specific fundamentals in my professional life? So it's the quote of you never feel like you're working a day in your life as long as you're doing something you love. So, and I think that I function in that space.
Yes. And I'll tell you, uh, that is something that is wonderful if you can find that niche, that specific spot where you're meant to be. And once you do, everything just kind of locks into place. Like you know that you're where you're meant to be. And it's sad in today's society that people are going through and they have that thing that they want to do, but they're doing something way off because they were told at some point along the line, you can't do that. That's not a real job or whatever it is. And they believe that. And it's sad that people can't do that thing that really they were likely meant here, put here and meant to do to create a difference in the world. They're off on doing some sort of factory job or whatever it is that's not necessarily what their desire is. And when we can find those things, when we can actually do the thing that we were meant to do, wow, it's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I feel like I wish more people felt empowered, for sure.
Yes. Now,
Yeah,
of course, balancing functional roles with strategic business partnerships requires a unique skill. How do you manage this kind of balance, and what advice could you offer other HR professionals that are aiming to transition into a more strategic role?
it's a good question. I don't always do a great job of it. I'll tell you that, in all honesty. But when I do a good job of it, I think the skills that I use is um, a few. I lean on my mentors to help me understand, am I staying on track with my goals? I sit back and I do my journaling to help make sure that my thought process and my actions align with the goals that I have set for myself. And then strategically making sure that I'm conscious of the decisions I'm making, right? For example, if I say, oh, I'm going to go work out 5 days a week and my intention is to drop X amount of pounds, does eating a cake or does, just binging on TV shows and missing out on gym make sense? And so that consciousness of like how we're making decisions and our actions aligning with our goals is what shows up not just in our personal life, but our professional life as well and our workspace. But it shows up in how we make choices as leaders and how we communicate choices as leaders. So my recommendation is, kind of keep your eye on the ball, but understand that it's not a one-way shot. You're going to have to kind of navigate through the processes and pathway that's ahead of you versus, forcing things that just doesn't make sense. So taking it and being human about it and knowing that, yes, mistakes are an opportunity. And, but at the same time, just, keeping your eye on the ball.
Very good. And I thought as you were talking about that, the thought of again practices came up and the intentionality behind those things, and it's clear that you are living a life that is in line with that. You're intentional about the things you're doing, and that's obvious to see.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. But I'm human, just like everyone else. And I just binged Ted Lasso, great show. Uh, so, but I think that's again coming back to saying like it's okay that I do that because this weekend I'm going to go on a really long bike ride. But again, it's making mistakes acceptable. And one of the things that I always introduce to my teams is let's go make mistakes, right? Let's get creative. Let's break that fear barrier and let's go make some mistakes. And we're going to be able to recover from them.
Well, and okay, so that's a really cool thing that you do with your team there, because mistakes and failures have such a negative mindset in today's society, but really those mistakes, those failures are essential to learn what to do and what not to do. And by
Right.
making those mistakes, you get to go through the process of figuring out, okay, not only get to figure out what works and what doesn't work, but also you get to see how far can you push the line? How far can you push the boundary before it's too far? Right? And that's
Right.
how innovation happens, right? You have to try to push that line as far back as you can. Okay, well, that's it. That maybe that was a little bit too far. You pull back just a little bit, right? We can't go just a little bit further yet. And by
Yeah.
doing that, by allowing those mistakes to happen and by not slamming the hammer when those mistakes do happen, you get to learn how
Yeah.
the system works. And then you can strategically design something that is new and creative and different than what we're doing right now.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And the fundamentals of that thought process is having trust within the team, right? Having respect. And so these characteristic traits that really empower someone to make these decisions and really feel like, yes, it aligns and yes, I feel confident is because they have the trust and the respect within their team and their leadership team. So, um, but it's a creative thought process. It's kind of falls in line with that growth mindset. And I think it's also fun. It's exciting to be like, yeah, just try it, see what happens.
Yeah, and well, that lowers everybody's kind of defense mechanism, so they can go and try to do those things. They know that they're not going to be, fired for doing something new just because it's something new. So that's how innovation happens.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's all in the response, right? Are you going to, and not to say this disrespectfully, but with my toddler, if she does something, am I going to react and freak out? And she's just probably going to do it in secrecy, or am I going to help her understand the situation and say, like, here's why we don't do it? And it's just building that respect and trust.
That's right. Now, reflecting on your career, are there any lessons or insights that have had a profoundly influenced your approach to HR, your strategy, your leadership, and what wisdom could you share again with other professionals?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's lessons left and right. I think the biggest one that has really stayed with me and really challenges me continuously is that a small, minute situation can get blown out of proportion and really impact someone's life. And whereas I could have just been dismissive, or I could have, somebody had a question, I could have just sent them a copy of a policy or something. Um, Whereas they were really looking for true support. And I've recognized where, in coming up in my career, that type of response hasn't always been the best. And so I've constantly challenged myself to really take time and ensure that team members get what they need from me when they come to me. Either it is a question answered, or is it thought process, or do they feel understood? Do they feel reassured, validated? Whatever it is that they're looking for, I want to make sure that they feel full when they walk away. So definitely a lesson learned, definitely something that I'm constantly challenged with.
Well, Nita, I got to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge and insights with us today. And as we are getting ready to wrap up here, do you have any key thoughts or final takeaways you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity, Chris and Chris. And it's been a pleasure. I enjoyed answering a lot of these questions and sharing my experience here. My key thought, I would say, is I want to continuously empower our HR leaders to bring that human in. Let's kind of continuously break the mold on the traditional HR thought processes, and help team members and leaders understand that we are a tool in their tool belt. We are here as a resource. We are here to empower and enable, and we're also growing. We're also learning.
Very good. Now, where can our listeners go to find out more about you?
Absolutely. So the HR Effect has a website, the hreffect.solutions. I'm also available on Instagram and on LinkedIn as well at
Very
the
good.
HR Effect.
Very good. I'll be sure to put those links in the show notes for this. Listeners, I want to say thank you for tuning in for our enriching episodes here and the Prestigious Initiative. Until next time.